Hello, in this video I'm going to talk about the prep work you should do before you actually start making cards and making your board. So for the class you will have assignments that will help you think about the rules of the game, the simulation you're running before you actually start building it. And this is why. It's just a lot of stuff if you try and keep it in your mind. You'll create a lot of work for yourself if you don't have it organized, if you don't have it structured. So one of the key things you want to think about first are the resources that you're going to have. They're going to be a part of your simulation. So I'm doing the Holodomor simulation, which is a reference to the man-made famine in early 1930s Ukraine when it was part of the Soviet Union that killed a large number of people. And it's going to be a family resource management simulation. Can you survive the Holodomor? And the resources that I have are food, wealth, economic contribution, health, and cunning. And those are going to do different things that we'll talk about later. For now, you just need to know that those are resources that exist. And when you're making your event cards, right, you need cards that simulate random events. That can be kind of overwhelming at first. It's like, oh, I have to make this many cards. How am I going to do that? And one way to do that that makes things really simple is you just think about how is that you have cards that either add or subtract those resources, right? So you have cards that add or subtract those resources, and you figure out how that connects to your simulation, right? You need an effect, a mechanic, and then a skin that explains why that happened. And the mechanic here is very simple. It's just add or subtract. Now you can include other things that are a little bit more random if you want, but for simplicity's sake, you can stay there. And you don't have to just say it adds one or it subtracts one. You can say it adds one or adds two or subtracts two, or it takes away a d6 or adds a d6. It just depends on the kind of atmosphere you're going for, and the lessons and your objectives. So I made a list of my 5 resources, and I decided that since this is a famine recreation, basically, I didn't want anyone to have the opportunity to actually increase their economic contribution, and I want to control how much economic contribution is lost. I don't want that number to go down without me saying so, right? I want that to be something that I'm really in control of for the simulation, because I want to constantly go down at a regular rate. I don't want it to be kind of random. But the other 4 things, that's fine if that's random for the event cards. That represents contingency. So you can see what I did. I made a list of 18 cards, and usually you want to think in terms of nines, because you can get 9 cards on a page, right? A page of regular paper, 9 cards fit there perfectly. So when they're 3.5 by 2.5, which is the size of a poker card. And that's usually what I like to use. People are kind of familiar with it. So you can see here, I'd made a list, and you want it to be numbered, right? Because then you don't have to keep counting. So I made a bullet point list. So add food, subtract food, add wealth, subtract wealth, add food, so forth. And you can see I included some, this is bugging me, I misspelled it because it's notes and I didn't run the spell check. You can see I also added kind of a reason, right? So subtract food, rats. And I listed, you'll notice I have only 1 add food here and then 2 subtract food, because I want the simulation to be hard, right? That's where you think about what you're doing. In this simulation, at least one person in the group should die, right? If everyone lives through, I haven't made it hard enough. So I have more negative things than positive things. In other simulations, you want to make it more even. You could even have more positive than negative, depending on what you want to do. But basically, I went through and I doubled it here just to remind myself that I want to make 2 cards for this, right? That I want to have 2 cards for the minus food, because I want it to be difficult. And you can see I have some other things. It doesn't always maybe make sense to you, but that's not necessarily important. It's important to make sense to me, right? These are just notes to help me keep organized. If it's an assignment, I may make it so you have to give me more information. So they say, how does a folk story add cunning? And the idea is I'm going to explain in the card, well, this gives the people wisdom from the past that helps them to understand how to deal with things, right? How does having a drunk official add cunning? Well, you get the guy drunk and he gives you information that he should not have given you. And now you know that the Communist Party is going to do something, and you're going to be ready for it. And then 18 is the title. You usually have a card that just says what the deck is. So it'll say the Holodomor. Can you survive the Holodomor? Right, and that way You may say, well, why do I need that? When you have a lot of card decks, you need that, and especially if you're in a classroom simulation, classroom environment. I mean, it helps to have those and be able to tell immediately what you're looking at. This is something I wrote just for the PowerPoint, so we don't need to worry about that for now. And then I made a list of the counters so I would know what I have to make, and for my board, so I know that I need a place for food to be stored. I need a place for wealth to be stored. I need a place where they can mark their economic contribution and their health. Cunning, there is not there. I can go ahead and add it just to be clear, but that is just cunning is on the card. But the idea here is you can see I have a really good idea of what I'm going to be doing in my simulation before I actually start making stuff. And in this simulation, it's a family management simulation, so I need a family, right? And so what I did was I have a numbered list that helps me keep track of everyone, and I've got the family position, their health, EC stands for economic contribution, food needed counts for or FN means food needed, and then I've got their names. And again, it helps to think about this beforehand to get these numbers in there, get all this stuff done before you start making cards, because then it's just a lot easier to make the cards. When you make the cards, you're going to be thinking about a lot of different things, and it's good to just have everything organized. Now, speaking of that organization, here is my folder. So I like to use Dropbox because if you're not familiar with it, it's free up to, I think, like a few gigabytes, which you can get a lot of documents on there for that. It's a free service where you can upload files and then you can make them available on multiple computers. You can use Google Docs or whatever works for you. I just happen to like Dropbox. So you can see History 122 online simulations. I plan on running this in my History 122 class. So I'll go to the Holodomor folder, and you'll notice I have 3 folders here. Character cards, that's for the family cards, event cards, and the board. And it just makes it a lot easier when you have it organized because you're going to have a lot of files and they're going to go all over the place. And notice, so I'm going to open my character cards. And let's make this details just so it's a little easier to kind of see the names. You'll notice that I have, it's connected to make sure. So I've got grandmother Katerina is number 1 on the family list. And look here, Katerina is the family list. There, right? She's number 1, number 2. And you can see how many files I end up making. So that's why I have these separate. But you can see I've got the number and the name. And that makes things a little bit easier. And then these are other things that I had to do along with it. Let's go back so you can see why we have so many files. So what I have is I've got the picture. When I save the picture, I saved it with the person's name. And then I have I make it in Krita. And then I have, actually this is the one. I make it in Krita. And then that's a certain special file type that preserves some information you need if you want to edit later. And then I save it as a PNG file. That tends to be the best file to save in, and then it's a complete card. So you can see like each family, I end up having at least 18 files here because each family member needs 3. So that's going to add up a lot. So it's really good to number your files like I've done here and have that connect back here. That just makes your life a lot easier. And if we go back, notice I have the event cards in a separate one. And there I found like I found a nice picture for food, so I used that. And you can see it's the same sort of thing, right? I've got the picture that goes with it. Here I used Photoshop, just because it was easier for me. I prefer Photoshop. It's just I'm showing you how to use Krita. I'll use the other examples later. And then, but it creates that Photoshop file. It preserves some information, and then there's the final PNG. And that just makes life easier. And you'll notice I added rats that says 2 and 3 because I know that's number 5. That's the file. If we go back up here for rats, 2 and 3, right? That just makes things a lot easier. And then I've got 4. And then I haven't yet made cards for the others, but notice I've got the images numbered 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And I had a couple pictures for that. Because I wasn't sure which one I would use. I want to see what looks better. 14, 15, same thing here, 16, and then 17. And I'll play around to see what one looks better on the card, and that's the one I'll end up using for the final card. But basically the idea here is that it's easy for this to explode and just to have too much stuff that you can't keep track of. And that's why it's helpful to use these lists with numbers and information in the file name. And that'll help you keep everything nice and organized. And that will make your life so much easier when you actually start making the cards.